The silence in that ballroom lasted maybe 3 seconds. But Loretta Beaumont Hale counted every one of them. She was standing near the registration table when it happened, holding a clipboard, checking off names, doing exactly what she'd been asked to do as a volunteer coordinator for the Hargrove Medical Center's annual charity gala. The room smelled like orchids and expensive cologne. Chandeliers threw gold light across 200 people in formal wear. And then Dr. Fletcher Crane walked over, looked directly at Loretta in her simple navy dress and said, "Excuse me, we need more water at table 7, and tell the kitchen the salmon is running cold." He didn't wait for an answer. He'd already turned back toward his colleagues, laughing at something one of them said. Loretta looked down at her clipboard. Then she looked at the registration banner above the table. Then she set the clipboard down very carefully, the way a person does when they're making a decision about what kind of person they're going to be in the next 60 seconds. She chose to say nothing. She would not choose that again. Loretta Beaumont Hale had spent 31 years in medicine, not as a nurse, not as an administrator, as a reconstructive surgeon, the kind that rebuilt faces after accidents, after tumors, after fires. She had trained at Johns Hopkins. She had published 42 peer-reviewed papers. She sat on the board of the American College of Surgeons. And tonight, she was volunteering at this gala because the pediatric wing that bore her late mother's name needed a new MRI machine, and Loretta believed in showing up for the things that mattered to her. She was 61 years old. She wore no name badge. She had deliberately left her credentials at home because she didn't like the way people changed when they saw them. Dr. Fletcher Crane was 44. He was chief of cardiology at Hargrove. He had a reputation for brilliance that he'd apparently decided covered the cost of basic human decency. He did not know any of this when he walked over to Loretta Beaumont Hale and told her the salmon was running cold. And she had let him not know it. That was the part that would stay with her. Loretta had grown up in Baltimore, the daughter of a postal worker and a school teacher who raised her to carry herself with exactness, not pride, exactness. Pride trips over itself, her mother used to say. Exactness keeps you standing. So she stood exactly where she was, at that registration table, and she watched Dr. Crane return to his circle of colleagues, and she thought, not yet. The gala ran beautifully for another 40 minutes. Loretta checked in late arrivals, directed people toward coat check, smiled at the couple who couldn't remember which table they'd been assigned. She was good at this. She was good at most things she put her hands to. At 8:15, the program director, a young woman named Cassidy, came to find her. "Dr. Beaumont Hale, they're about to start the donor recognition segment. You're listed to present the Founding Benefactor Award." Loretta had donated $1.4 million to Hargrove Medical Center over the past 11 years, the pediatric wing, the surgical fellowship in her mother's name, the new simulation lab on the 4th floor. She had not announced any of it publicly because that was not why she did it. Tonight, apparently, the hospital's development office had decided the time for quiet was over. "Is the microphone at the podium?" Loretta asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Then I'm ready." She set down her clipboard for the second time that evening. Here is the thing about rooms full of people who believe they already know the shape of the world. They recalibrate slowly. When Loretta Beaumont Hale walked to the podium, a few people near the registration area looked mildly surprised. Wasn't she the volunteer? And then returned to their conversations. The room kept its hum. Waitstaff moved between tables. Somewhere near the back, a glass was refilled. Dr. Fletcher Crane was seated at table 4, center of the room, with 3 other physicians and their spouses. He was mid-sentence about something, a golf trip, from the sounds of it, when the program directors stepped to the microphone and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, it is my honor to introduce our founding benefactor, the woman whose generosity built this institution's future. Please welcome Dr. Loretta Beaumont Hale." The room did what rooms do. Applause, chairs shifting, heads turning. Fletcher Crane turned. He went very still in a way that had nothing to do with politeness. Loretta walked to the podium. She adjusted the microphone. She looked out at 200 people and found, without trying, the exact face she was looking for. "Good evening," she said. "I'll keep this brief because I've always believed that generosity speaks for itself and doesn't need much help from words." Laughter, warm and easy, she let it settle. "I started giving to Hargrove 11 years ago because my mother was treated here. She had a rare autoimmune condition that most facilities wouldn't touch. The team here spent 8 months figuring out how to keep her alive. They did. She lived another 6 years." A pause. "That's the kind of medicine I believe in. The kind that doesn't give up on people because they're complicated." She let that land where it needed to land. "I'm proud to present tonight's founding benefactor recognition on behalf of the Beaumont Hale Family Fund. And I want to say to everyone in this room, the physicians, the nurses, the administrators, the volunteers, the people who carry clipboards and check names off lists, every single person in this building is part of what makes a hospital worth saving. Everyone." More applause, longer this time. Loretta nodded once, collected the award plaque from Cassidy, and stepped away from the podium. She did not look at table 4. She didn't need to. Fletcher Crane found her during the cocktail reception. She saw him coming and did not make it easy for him. She didn't walk away either. She stood near the window with a glass of sparkling water and watched him cross the room toward her with the particular gait of a man who has recently realized he has made a significant error and is now deciding how to manage it. "Dr. Beaumont Hale." He extended his hand. "Fletcher Crane, Chief of Cardiology. I don't believe we've formally met." "No," she said, "we haven't." He shook her hand. His grip was firm in the compensatory way. "Your remarks tonight were incredibly moving. Your support for this institution has been, what you've built here is remarkable." "Thank you." "I have to say I wasn't aware." He stopped, reconsidered. "I wasn't aware you'd be here this evening." "I volunteer at most of our major events," Loretta said. "I find it useful to see how the institution operates from the ground level." Something shifted behind his eyes, just slightly. "Of course, that's admirable." "Dr. Crane," she said, "Table 7 has been complaining about the salmon all evening. You might want to follow up with the kitchen." She watched him understand, the full weight of it, arriving late but arriving completely. To his credit, he didn't deflect, he didn't pretend. He looked at her directly and said, "I owe you an apology." "Yes," she said, "you do." "I assumed." "You did," she said, "and you weren't the first. You probably won't be the last." She tilted her head. "The question I'd encourage you to sit with isn't why you assumed what you assumed. Most people know the answer to that one if they're honest. The better question is what you do differently tomorrow. In your department, with your residents, that's the conversation worth having." He was quiet for a moment. "Would you be willing to have it? That conversation?" Loretta considered him. "Make an appointment through the hospital's office. I sit on the Physician Conduct and Culture Committee." She let that settle. "We're currently redesigning the onboarding curriculum for department heads. I think your perspective could be useful." This was not the response he had expected. She could see that. Good. People learned faster when surprised. What Loretta didn't tell Fletcher Crane that evening, what she hadn't told most people in that room, was that she'd been through this particular hallway before. Many times. Different buildings, different names, same architecture of assumption. The first time she was mistaken for housekeeping, she was 34, doing rounds at a teaching hospital in Philadelphia. A patient's family member had handed her a bag of trash. She'd taken it because she was tired and it was easier than explaining herself. She'd thrown it away, gone back to finish her rounds, and then sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes before she could make herself drive home. She had told exactly one person about that, her husband, Reginald. He'd been quiet for a while, and then he'd said, "Did you throw the trash away or throw the bag at him?" And she'd laughed for the first time all day. That was 30 years ago. Reginald had died of a stroke 4 years back. She still talked to him sometimes in the parking lots of hospitals when she needed a minute. She didn't need that tonight. Tonight felt different. Maybe it was because she was 61 and didn't have patience for the long version of grief anymore. Maybe it was because the pediatric wing was close to fully funded and she could feel that particular good thing finally existing in the world. Or maybe it was because Fletcher Crane had actually apologized without equivocation and had actually meant it. She was a good enough reader of people to know the difference. She didn't forgive him cleanly. Forgiveness wasn't a switch, but she didn't carry the evening home in her chest the way she'd carried that parking lot in Philadelphia. That felt like progress. 3 days later, Loretta's assistant forwarded her a meeting request from Dr. Fletcher Crane's office. Subject line, Physician Culture Curriculum, Consultation Request. She accepted it. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday in her office at Hargrove's main campus. She arrived 6 minutes early, set out 2 cups of coffee, and waited. Crane arrived on time. He sat across from her, and he had a notepad, and he was clearly prepared to listen rather than perform. She noticed that first. "I did some reading," he said, "after the gala, about implicit bias in clinical settings. The research is—" He stopped. "I knew it existed. I'd read studies in a general sense, but I hadn't thought about how it operated in my own department, in my own behavior." "Most people don't," Loretta said, "until they have a reason to." "I gave you a reason." "You did." "I'm sorry," he said again. "I want to say it plainly, not in a hallway." She nodded. This was the version she could receive. They spent 90 minutes going through the curriculum framework she'd been developing with the conduct committee. Not as adversaries, not as a sinner and a saint, but as 2 physicians trying to figure out how to build something better than what currently existed. Crane had observations that were actually useful. His department saw patterns she didn't have visibility into. By the end of the meeting, they had a draft outline for a 3-part workshop series that neither of them could have written alone. When he left, Loretta's assistant, a young man named Deshawn, who had been with her for 6 years and missed very little, knocked on the open door and said, "How'd it go?" "Better than I expected," she said. "You want to tell me what happened at the gala?" "Cassidy texted me something, but I didn't want to ask." Loretta looked at him for a moment. Deshawn was 28. He wanted to go to medical school eventually. He was the kind of person who paid attention to how things got handled. "Someone mistook me for waitstaff," she said. He was quiet. "Then what did you do?" "I let it happen. Then I went up and gave a speech in front of 200 people. Then I told him the salmon was cold." Deshawn thought about this. "That's a lot better than what I would have done." "You'd have said something right away." "Probably louder than I should have." "Which is also valid," Loretta said. "Don't let anyone tell you there's only one right way to handle being disrespected. There's the way that protects your peace and the way that protects someone else's future. Sometimes they're the same way. Sometimes they're not." She picked up her coffee. "The important thing is to make a choice, not just react." He wrote that down. She noticed and said nothing about it. The workshop series launched 8 weeks later. Hargrove's development team, to Loretta's mild exasperation, wanted to do a press release. She asked them to wait until after the second session, when they'd have data on whether it was actually working. "With respect," the communications director said, "this is a significant initiative, and our donors." "Your donors will be more impressed by outcomes than announcements," Loretta said. "Wait for the outcomes." They waited. The first session had 63 attendees, all department heads and senior staff. Fletcher Crane co-facilitated the second half. He was not the most comfortable person in the room, and Loretta thought that was probably appropriate. Discomfort, managed well, was a working condition, not an obstacle. He didn't perform ease he hadn't earned yet. She respected that. After the second session, 3 attendees came to her separately to describe experiences they'd had. Being overlooked at conferences, being mistaken for facilities staff, being addressed by first name in professional settings where every white colleague got a title. One of them, a black cardiologist named Dr. Yvette Ossie, who had been at Hargrove for 12 years, said, "I've been waiting for someone to build this. I thought I was going to have to do it myself. You would have, Loretta said. Probably, Dr. Osi smiled, but I'm glad I didn't have to. The press release went out after the third session. The headline used Loretta's name and mentioned the Gala, because someone had talked, which was fine. It always happened. The story moved through a few medical industry publications, then got picked up by a regional outlet, then a national one. The framing varied by publication. Some focused on the curriculum. Some focused on the Gala moment. One piece, which Loretta found on a Tuesday morning with her coffee, was headlined, Hargrove Surgeon's Quiet Confrontation After Gala Mix-Up Sparks Hospital-Wide Culture Reform. She read it once. She thought the word quiet was doing a lot of work in that sentence. She thought confrontation wasn't quite right either. She thought mix-up was doing the most diplomatic labor of all. But the piece got the substance right. That was what mattered. Her phone started going that afternoon. Former colleagues, old friends. One of her Hopkins professors who was 92 and still had strong opinions about how medicine treated its own. Her daughter called from Portland and said, "Mom, you're in the news and you didn't tell me." Her daughter always said this. There was always something. "I didn't do it for the news," Loretta said. "I know that. That doesn't mean I don't want to know." "You're right," Loretta said. "I'm sorry." "Tell me what actually happened. The article leaves things out." So Loretta told her. The clipboard, the salmon comment, the 3 seconds of silence she'd counted, choosing to say nothing, and then choosing, later, to say exactly what needed to be said in a room full of people who needed to hear it in the way that would actually be heard. Her daughter was quiet for a long moment. "Grandma would have loved that," she finally said. "The timing of it." "Your grandmother had a gift for timing," Loretta agreed. "She always said the most powerful thing you can do is make someone wait for the truth. Don't give it to them before they can hold it." "Is that what you did?" Loretta thought about the 3 seconds, about Fletcher Crane at the podium, going still, about Dr. Osisi saying, "I thought I was going to have to do it myself," about Deshawn writing things down in her doorway. "I think so," she said. "I think that's what I did." The pediatric wing MRI machine was installed the following spring. Loretta was there for the installation, not because anyone asked her to be, but because she wanted to see it in the room. She stood in the doorway while the technicians ran calibration tests, watching the machine hum to life in the space her money had made possible. In the building her mother had survived, and she thought about all the children who would lie in that machine and be seen, actually, precisely medically seen, in the years ahead. The workshops were now a standing part of Hargrove's onboarding for all senior appointments. Fletcher Crane had become a genuine advocate for them in ways that had surprised her and, she suspected, had surprised himself. He'd be speaking at a conference in the fall about the curriculum's development. He'd asked her to co-present. She'd said she'd think about it. She was still thinking about it. Not because she doubted him, because she had other things to build, and only so many hours, and she had learned, late in life, later than she would have liked, that you didn't have to be in every room where your work was being done. Sometimes you built the thing and handed it forward and trusted the people who caught it. Her mother had taught her that, in the end, not with words, with 6 years of being alive after everyone said she wouldn't be. Loretta stood in the doorway of the MRI suite and listened to the machine calibrate and did not need anything else from this moment. It was enough. It was exactly enough. I keep thinking about those 3 seconds. Not the speech, not the applause, not even the look on Fletcher Crane's face when the room stood up and said her name. I keep thinking about the 3 seconds Loretta counted in silence after he told her to clear the tables and chose to say nothing. That's the part most people miss when they hear a story like this. They want the comeback, the sharp word, the public embarrassment, the moment the villain gets cut down in real time. And I understand that. I've wanted that too. But what Loretta did in those 3 seconds wasn't weakness. It was something harder than anger. It was clarity. She looked at the room, at the moment, at what was actually possible, and she chose the action that would matter past midnight. That kind of judgment doesn't come from nowhere. It's built. It accumulates over 31 years of showing up in rooms that weren't designed with you in mind and deciding, again and again, what you're going to do with what you find there. That's what I'd call the deepest form of character, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to direct it. Loretta felt everything in that ballroom. She just refused to let the feeling make the decision for her. And then there's what she did after. She didn't walk away. She didn't let the evening become a wound she carried home. She made an appointment. She sat across from the man who'd dismissed her, and she handed him a framework for doing better, not because he deserved the grace, but because the residents in his department deserved someone who'd been changed by it. That's a level of thinking I find genuinely hard. It requires you to hold your own injury and someone else's future in the same hand at the same time. Most of us can only hold one. What I notice is that the people who manage that, who absorb something unfair and convert it into something structural, are almost always people who've been doing the quiet work for a long time. Loretta had been funding that hospital for 11 years without a press release. She'd been building the fellowship, the simulation lab, the pediatric wing, all of it without needing the room to know her name. That kind of discipline, choosing contribution over recognition consistently when no one's watching, is what makes the moment in the ballroom land the way it does. You can't fake that foundation. The room felt it. Even Crane felt it. And Deshawn writing things down in the doorway, that's the detail I can't shake. Because that's how it actually moves forward, not in press releases, in the people who are watching how you handle the hard thing and deciding what they'll do when it's their turn. I think about the kind of person I want to be when something unfair happens to me in public. Whether I'd have the steadiness to count to 3 and choose. Whether I'd have enough stored up purpose to turn the injury into a workshop. I'm not sure I would, but I think knowing it's possible, seeing it done, changes something about what I reach for. Loretta stood in the doorway of that MRI suite at the end and needed nothing else from the moment. That's what it looks like when a life is being lived on the right terms. Not loudly, exactly.